Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in the prophecy of Zechariah, just two books from the end of our journey, going all the way through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, is prophesying. He's one of the prophets with Haggai and with Ezra the scribe, and then Nehemiah the priest. He goes back as one of the exiles, returning back to Jerusalem after the 70-year exile to restore the temple, rebuild the wall, restore the wall, and then also to kind of set up the community, the country, the nation. Now, I need to make a correction on something. What I said was that when Zechariah, I said that the opposition um, that Nehemiah and them had experienced when they started rebuilding the wall, that the wall had been stopped for about 40 to 45 years. Um, that was wrong. It's going to be more like 15 years. And the reason why I made that mistake, that error, was misreading um, the dates of the kings. That's something that happened in my head. So my point is, I want to make that correction. Is they were not halted from restoring the temple for um, 15 to 40. 45 years that I said. I can say it's going to be more like 10 to 15 years. Okay. All right. Now, um, so Zechariah. Zechariah, and I call this the revelation of the Old Testament. We're going to get into a lot of um, revelation. A lot of it kind of is going to remind me of some of the revelation we saw in Ezekiel, as well as what we're going to see in the book of Revelation. And we're going to get a very detailed what's going to happen at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And one of the things about prophecy, as I said, it's not hard to understand. Whenever you hear people say that prophecy is hard to understand because they're not reading the book the way they should. And sadly, they read it through the lens of whatever denominational or theological construct. And that's where the problem comes in at. But just reading the plain and simple reading, we can understand it. As long as you don't add to it or take away from it. Don't inject your own thoughts. Um, but it is exhaustive, though. And so you cannot form a study of eschatology on a few verses. But look, as we're going to see in the book of this prophecy of Zechariah here, there's going to be some fantastic revelation. And again, when we put this with the rest of the writings of the old prophets, Matthew 24, Paul's writing in Second Thessalonians and First Thessalonians, and the book of Revelation, we get a full picture of God's message, God's revelation. All right, so let's get back to it. We're gonna pick this up here in chapter 7. It says, on the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, son of Barichani, son of Edo. Now remember, this timing here is after they had returned. So they had been in the property now between, let's say, about 15 years, maybe going on between 15 and 20 years, okay? Again, I made the mistake of saying 40, but that was way, way off, okay? And I'll tell you how I got to that. One of the mistake that I made, I was looking at uh, the dates of the kings of the Mede and Persians, and then misread the dating of the length of their rulership and miscounted. But if you look here, when in 537 BC the exiles returned, that was what we read last time in Ezra chapter 1 when Cyrus the king made the decree. So they return, and then we see around 534 BC in Ezra 4 where they get this hinder. They get this, the adversaries hinder the work through the king. They get the king to say, stop working on the temple. So now when we come down to chapter 5, around 520, this is when they get permission to go back. The prophecy comes, start back to work. So that's what I'm saying. You look at it about 14 years. That's why. So, and this is around Darius, okay? So around Darius, the king. So the difference between Cyrus' decree, which is 537 BC, and then Darius' decree for them to resume the work about, again, 14 years. All right. So, verse 7 again says, on the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Edo. So here's some of his first sets of visions. He says, I looked out in the night and saw a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the valley. Behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. I asked, what are these, my Lord? The angel who was talking to me replied, I will show you what they are. Now let me stop again. And just when we think about prophecy, and again, you always hear when people say that prophecy is hard. The book of Revelations is hard because it's full of this symbols and metaphors but notice they're explained. So my point is, we won't have to guess what these prophecies are. We won't have to guess. We won't have to, wonder, what do these horses mean? Okay, he says, I'm going to show you what they are. So verse 10, then the man standing among the myrtle trees explained, they are the ones the Lord has sent to patrol the earth. They report to the angel of the Lord standing among the myrtle trees, we have patrolled the earth, and right now the whole earth is calm and quiet. Now, what is interesting about this is that why a lot of the Old Testament prophecies centered around Israel, he's going to get back to that. Notice here, this prophecy is concerning what? The entire earth. Okay? Verse 12. Then the angel of the Lord responded, how long, Lord of hosts, will you withhold mercy from Jerusalem and the cities of Jerusalem that you have been angry with these 70 years? Then the Lord replied with kind and comforting words to the angel who was speaking with me. So the angel who was speaking with me said, proclaim, the Lord of hosts says, I am extremely jealous for Jerusalem and Zion. Now, you see this term jealous, and oftentimes when you hear the Bible says God is a jealous God, we think of jealousy in a catty way, right? And it's not. The idea of the word jealous means that it burns with passion. The ideal of it that it burns with passion to the point that it has to be quenched. Now, when jealousy is not quenched, that's when you see this It's like I'm. That's why it says I'm burning with this jealousy for Jerusalem. Okay, verse 15. So, in other words, it's not the same kind of jealousy that I have. Even though, if I would say, for example, if I was to see my wife with another man, I would burn with jealousy. Why? Because that's my wife, right? That's my emotions, what I should be having my wife, and she shouldn't be given to another man. That's not the how God is looking at that. But He's looking at the fact that God desires us, and then we're not returning it the way we should. We're not returning the love. Okay, so it's kind of that those emotions are out there not being quenched. Verse 15, he says, "I am fiercely angry with the nations that are at ease. For I was a little angry, but they made it worse. Therefore, this is what the Lord of hosts says: In mercy, I have returned to Jerusalem. My house will be rebuilt within. This is the declaration of the Lord of hosts. And a measuring line will be stretched out over Jerusalem. Proclaim further, this is what the Lord of hosts says: My cities will again overflow with prosperity. The Lord will once more comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem." So this is, remember, post-Babylonian times, when God is saying, 70 years I was angry, I'm no longer angry. Now I'm going to restore Jerusalem. I'm going to restore them. Verse 18, then I looked up and saw 4 horns. So I asked the angel who was speaking with me, "What are these?" And he said to me, now again, remember, he's always explaining what we don't have to guess. Now, let me also say this, that when we talk about the 4 horns, or talking about any kind of, like, now, this is going to say the context in which the horns mean. This is what the horns mean in this context. And they may have another application in another context, again, which will, at that time, it would be explained. So, for example, when you look at trumpet and horns, in this case, he's going to explain what these horns are. But let's say when we get to the book of Revelations, the trumpets will mean something different. So, for example, you look at Revelations chapter 9, for example, 8 and 9, where you see the trumpet judgment. Okay, then you look at First Corinthians, when Paul talks about that at the last trump or trumpet sound, we will be changed. 2 different trumpets, and you interpret them in those contexts. The reason why I say that is because people do make the mistake. They do make the mistake of applying to think that the trumpet means trumpets everywhere, that the context speaks for itself. Okay. Verse 18 says, "And I looked up and saw 4 horns. So I asked the angel who was speaking with me, 'What are these?' And he said to me, 'These are the horns that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem.' Then the Lord showed me 4 craftsmen. I asked, 'What are they coming to do?' He replied, 'These are the horns that scattered Judah so no one could raise his head. These craftsmen have come to terrify them, to cut off the horns of the nations that raise their horns against the land of Judah, to scatter it.'" All right, chapter 2, verse 1 says, "I looked up and I saw a man with a measuring line in his hand. And I asked, 'Where are you going?' And he answered me, 'To measure Jerusalem, to determine its width and length.' Then the angel who was speaking with me went out, and another angel went out to meet him. He said to him, 'Run and tell this young man, Jerusalem will be inhabited without walls because of the number of people and livestock in it. The declaration of the Lord: I will be a wall of fire around it, and I will be the glory within it. Now, this prophecy, and this is what we have sometimes, what is called a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. Because actually, in the near fulfillment, they restored the wall under Nehemiah. But in the ultimate fulfillment of what God's plan and purpose for Israel, they won't have any walls to live in because God will be their protection. Verse 6, get up, leave the land of the north. This is the Lord's declaration. For I've scattered you like the four winds of heaven. This is the Lord's declaration. Now you should keep that in mind. Notice he says, the Lord's, I have scattered you like the four winds of heaven. You see this language used in Matthew 24. Okay. All right. So verse 7, go, Zion, escape, you who are living with the daughter of Babylon. For the Lord of hosts says, he has sent me for his glory against the nations who are plundering you. For anyone who touches you touches the pupil of his eye, or in some cases I believe it's called the apple of his eye. He says, I will move against them with my power, and they will become plunder for their own servants. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me. Daughter of Zion, shout for joy and be glad, for I am coming to dwell among you. This is the Lord's declaration. Many nations will join themselves to the Lord on that day and become my people. I will dwell among you, and you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. The Lord will take possession of Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and he will once again choose Jerusalem. Let all the people be silent before the Lord, for he is coming from his holy dwelling. Now, there's a very interesting prophecy here that if you would notice that he goes beyond in more of a future sense, because we know that it did not happen in this day. One of the good things about us is that we can look back and see what, from our perspective, almost a 2,500 year period, that we can look back and say, okay, what has happened? Look at verse 11 again. Many nations will join themselves to the Lord on that day and will become my people. So what days he's referring to. So in other words, these nations did not do that during the time that Nehemiah and them was restoring the wall and restoring Jerusalem. So this is a kind of a future prophecy. And before I leave, I want to do one other thing too, just so we know by way of how to interpret prophecy. I want you to see something here. I'm just going to take just a moment. Look at verse 6. Notice what he says. Get up, leave the land of the north. This is the Lord's declaration. Now, the land of the north, of course, referred to Babylon, and at this time, the land of the Persian Medes. This is the Lord's declaration. For I have scattered you like the four winds of the heaven. Now, I want to do this quickly. I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 24. And the reason why I wanted to this is more like a little Bible school here, lessons here in terms of interpretation. I just want you to see something here quickly. So look at verse number 30. This is Matthew 24. Jesus, again, teaching on eschatology, prophecy. He says, then the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the people of the earth will mourn, for they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now here's my point. When you read something like this, a lot of people think he's talking to the church. He's not. But my point is, we've seen this language before And we see it here in Zechariah when he says, I have scattered you like the four winds of heaven. Okay. All right. So this is why it's important to read all the prophecy. And that's kind of my point. This is why it's important to read all the prophecies, because you get the fuller picture. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in the next study.